Batman's not like Wolverine. Batman's not going to be fazed by Deadpool. Batman doesn't care. Batman says, I ran around with a hyperactive kid for years. My arch enemy's a disfigured clown. But he's also got a kind of super dry, dark sense of humour where most of the time he's taking the piss out of Deadpool. Deadpool even says, guess who's headlining this crossover? He just basically has to take his lumps because Batman's the main thing in this.
Crossovers are an integral part of comics history. Ever since superheroes emerged on the printed page in the late 1930s, fans have longed to see all of their favourite characters face off. This is especially true when considering the two biggest publishers in North America, Marvel and DC. Since the mid-1970s, the two companies have released a wide array of unexpected crossovers, versus stories, and universe-altering events that bring their respective rosters together. I've covered several of these comics on this channel so far, from the original 1976 Superman vs Spider-Man all the way up to 2003's JLA Avengers, which up until very recently was the last time that any Marvel and DC characters actually crossed paths. However, news broke at the start of 2025 that two brand new Marvel and DC crossovers were set for release, starring DC's Dark Knight Detective and Marvel's Merc with a Mouth. We learned in the summer which writers and artists would work on each company's respective issues. Marvel's Deadpool/Batman was written by Zeb Wells with art by Greg Capullo and released in September, while DC's Batman/Deadpool would hit shelves in November, brought to life by the team of Grant Morrison and Dan Mora. These comics were incredibly exciting, not just for their significance as the first of their kind in over 2 decades, but also for marking Morrison's return to the world of superheroes. And so in this video, I want to explain the history of both Batman and Deadpool crossovers, discuss how they came to be, and their place within the storied history of DC and Marvel team-ups, and in the spirit of unexpected crossovers, sit down with Grant Morrison themselves for a deep dive conversation into all things Batman and Deadpool. Before we continue though, just a quick reminder to leave a like on this video if you enjoy it, and subscribe to Owen Likes Comics so you don't miss out on any future videos. In order to understand what makes these Batman and Deadpool crossovers so noteworthy, I should first provide a little bit of context about the long and storied history of DC and Marvel team-ups. The first time any characters from these two respective universes ever crossed paths was in 1976, when the team of Jerry Conway and Ross Andru published Superman vs. The Amazing Spider-Man. As you might expect, this story was a tremendous success, both commercially and critically, and as a result, Marvel and DC began to publish more frequent crossovers throughout the late 70s and early 1980s. In July of 1981, a Superman/Spider-Man sequel was released, this time written by Jim Shooter and Marv Wolfman with art by John Buscema, alongside Batman vs. The Incredible Hulk. A year later, Chris Claremont, Walt Simonson and Terry Austin teamed up for another much desired crossover, Uncanny X-Men and the New Teen Titans. This period also coincided with a planned Justice League Avengers series to be written by Jerry Conway and drawn by George Perez. However, due to creative differences between Marvel editor-in-chief Jim Shooter and DC Vice President Dick Giordano, the project was eventually scrapped. These two companies wouldn't work together again until 1996, when they collaborated on the 4-issue miniseries Marvel vs. DC. Written by Ron Marz and Peter David, with art by Dan Jurgens and Claudio Castanelli, this series was published between February and May, and spotlighted fights between heroes and villains from the two universes. These battles eventually led to the continuities merging, forming the Amalgam Comics brand in April of 1996. Even in the aftermath of Marvel vs. DC and the short-lived Amalgam crossovers, the two publishers continued releasing several crossovers throughout the remainder of the 1990s. This era of crossovers and collaborations would eventually culminate in 2003, when, after 3 decades in development hell, George Perez teamed with writer Kurt Busiek to finally release JLA Avengers. Published as a 4-part miniseries released between September 2003 and March of 2004, JLA Avengers marked the pinnacle of intercompany storytelling, with Busiek and Perez drawing on their extensive knowledge of each set of heroes to tell a quintessential tale that showcased the best of not only each company's various characters, but the thing that makes each universe distinct. Unfortunately, JLA Avengers marked the end of this period of regular crossovers, as throughout the remainder of the 2000s and the 2010s, both publishers decided to instead focus on telling large-scale event stories within their own universe, such as Secret Wars, Civil War, and Final Crisis, as well as numerous status quo changes to their respective universes through periods like the New 52, Rebirth, and All New Marvel. This remained the case until late 2024, when rumours began circulating that Marvel Editor-in-Chief C.B. Sapolsky and his DC counterpart Marie Javins were beginning to discuss the possibility of once again collaborating. And at the start of 2025, this speculation would ultimately be confirmed, with the announcement of 2 Batman and Deadpool one-shots set for release in the latter half of the year. After 2 decades of waiting, the first new intercompany crossover was released in September 2025, in the form of Marvel's Deadpool/Batman by Zeb Wells and Greg Capullo. Morrison and Dan Mora's companion piece from DC, aptly titled Batman/Deadpool, would arrive 2 months later in November. Regarding how this concept came together, as well as the specific development of Batman/Deadpool, I recently sat down with Grant Morrison and asked them how this project came to be.
It was really simple. Marie Javins at DC got in touch and just said, we're doing this, would you be interested in writing it? And I've no idea what provoked Marie to actually get in touch with me, because as you say, I hadn't done anything for a while and I wasn't really up for anything. And it seemed like an unlikely one, you know, so the fact that she got in touch with me was so bizarre in the first place. But as soon as she said Batman Deadpool, my mind started going on it, and that's when I knew, well, the chances are I want to do this thing, because it immediately started to spark some thoughts. And I'd loved the Deadpool Wolverine movie, you know, I really liked that film. I thought it was a pretty, I mean, very, very light and frothy type of thing, but I thought it was like a really good way to do superheroes. It had a kind of tone and a wit and a fun about it that also worked, you know, it had the emotions in there as well, thanks to Hugh Jackman mostly. But I really liked it. I thought it was a pretty impressive version of what a superhero movie should be these days. So given that, I thought I really fancy writing some of that Ryan Reynolds type, you know, dialogue, that Deadpool pop culture heavy type of, you know, snark. And that was the first thing. I thought, yeah, I want to do this. And the second thing was obviously, well, Deadpool's known for breaking the fourth wall. And as soon as I thought that, I thought, well, okay, I've got this history with fourth wall stuff going back to Animal Man. But in particular, there's that Suicide Squad appearance where John Ostrander and Kim Yale are a kind of version of me in there as a Suicide Squad baddie called the Writer, who then gets promptly eaten. So I kind of figured there's definitely something there. I'd always wanted to kind of go back there and try and do something with that, you know, and pull those threads together. So honestly, the minute Marie said this, all of these thoughts cascaded in almost in a single moment, and I just said, yeah, I want to do this. So that was it. It was a very, very simple, very unlikely, very out of the blue, but at the same time, it was exactly what I wanted to do at the time, and it just all fell together really easily.
Before we continue though, I want to take a second and talk to you about something I should probably promote more often, patreon.com/Owen Likes Comics. I've been working on this channel full time for a little while now. It's my absolute dream job and I love it, and it wouldn't be possible without everyone who watches, subscribes, likes and comments, as well as all of my supporters over on Patreon. In case you didn't know, I release several bonus videos and podcasts every month on my Patreon, as well as the full uncut conversations with special guests that I record as part of these videos. Alongside this video, you can watch the full Batman Deadpool conversation with Grant Morrison ad-free and a week before I release it on YouTube, as well as an exclusive video discussing my favourite comics of 2025. You can also watch all of my videos ad-free and several days early and be part of a community of like-minded people where we regularly chat about comics, movies and everything else. There are multiple different tiers with unique perks starting at just $1 per month. I will leave links in the video description and the pinned comment, or just go to patreon.com/Owen Likes Comics. At the very least, check it out and see if it's something you'd be interested in. Thank you for all of your support, and let's get back to the video. Each issue of the Deadpool and Batman crossovers tells its own self-contained story, and for the purpose of being chronological, I'll begin by discussing Marvel's issue, released in September of 2025. Wells and Capullo's story begins in Gotham City, where Bruce Wayne contemplates in his study before he's suddenly attacked by Deadpool. We quickly learn that a mysterious client has requested Wade's services, and he visits Bruce believing that he may also require an assassin. Bruce obviously refuses, but takes an interest in Deadpool's activity and who hired him. Later that night, Batman meets with Commissioner Gordon, but Deadpool interrupts their conversation, leading to a fight between himself and the Dark Knight. Eventually, Deadpool agrees to help Batman stop the Joker from unleashing a new toxin throughout the city. The unlikely partners race across town and arrive at the villain's hideout, where Deadpool shockingly betrays Batman and knocks him unconscious. Batman wakes up and realizes that it was the Joker who hired Deadpool, as he's held captive in the villain's funhouse. This partnership between Joker and Deadpool doesn't last though, when the Clown Prince of Crime injects Wade with the toxin, causing him to seemingly mutate into a Joker-like state. Batman frees himself and tries to stop Joker from unleashing the toxin on the entire city. Meanwhile, Deadpool reveals that the gas doesn't actually affect him and triggers the failsafe to prevent the toxin's release. With Gotham saved, Batman reluctantly thanks Wade for his help, but sternly warns him to leave his city. As Batman drives off for his next adventure, Deadpool instead decides to stick around and explore more of this different reality. While this comic and DC's follow-up story in November aren't directly linked by plot, they both establish the framework and tone that Batman and Deadpool's encounters will take place in. Wells and Capullo's issue really highlights the odd couple dynamic between these two characters, the stoic and serious master strategist Batman with the self-aware and oftentimes slapstick Deadpool. Overall, I think this story is a lot of fun. While it's not among my personal favourites of the DC Marvel crossovers, it did a good job of establishing what to expect from this new era of team-ups. I should also note that seeing this story be brought to life by Greg Capullo was a particular highlight, as he's not only regarded as a definitive Batman artist, but someone who also cut his teeth drawing early issues of X-Force that starred Deadpool. With Marvel's first entry in this two-part crossover now out and in the world, DC would follow suit in November 2025. However, the company would take a somewhat different approach, using the setup of Deadpool and Batman to actually tell a story decades in the making, playing off numerous plot points and ideas from several acclaimed stories by its writer, Grant Morrison. Regarding how Morrison approached the Batman-Deadpool dynamic, as well as the overarching structure of this issue, the writer explained to me that,
well, I thought it just suited my style very well, you know, and once I'd agreed to do the thing, that immediately I began to hear runs of dialogue in my head with Batman and Deadpool. And the first thing I realised when I started to hear the dialogue between them was that Batman's not like Wolverine. Batman's not going to be fazed by Deadpool. Batman doesn't care in the way that Wolverine cares. And that line came to me, which was the kind of the fundamental line of it. Batman says, you know, I ran around with a hyperactive kid for years. My arch enemy's a disfigured clown. Have you been talking this whole time? And that idea of Batman being super focused on the task and not being distracted, but he's also got a kind of super dry, dark sense of humour where most of the time he's taking the piss out of Deadpool, and Deadpool doesn't even realise, or if he does realise, he's forced into taking that sort of subsidiary role because it's Batman's crossover, you know. And Deadpool even says, "Guess who's headlining this crossover?" He just basically has to take his lumps because Batman's the main thing in this. So yeah, I mean, Deadpool was a really good fit for me, I thought, because Deadpool's more like me, you know. When I'm with my friends, I tend to be that kind of person, the constant pop culture, trying to make my friends laugh, and that's how we relate to one another. So it was really easy for me to just slip into that kind of annoying, you know, and I like to think I'm not as annoying as Deadpool. Obviously, Deadpool's meant to be annoying on the page, but certainly the way he thinks and the way he tries to find the humour in everything, the way he's constantly referring to pop culture is very like how I talk to my friends. So it was quite easy to slip into that voice, and actually harder to slip out of it. I mean, I've got pages and pages of dialogue for the characters and loads of Deadpool stuff that just didn't make it because there's only 27 pages in the book, but I could have written 100 pages with that guy just talking and talking and talking. So no, it was as I say, I think it was a character that really suited my type of writing and the kind of absurdity and the kind of the level that I like to go on. I like to come at things, as I say, from from the absurdity rather than from the darkness or the, the adventure or whatever. For me, the underlying quality of all these things is ridiculous and ironic.
Morrison and Mora's tale follows Batman investigating a mysterious artifact called the Cosmic Keyboard, only to encounter Wade Wilson. The two heroes are forced to journey together through a labyrinth, where they're ultimately confronted by Cassandra Nova. Nova, who intends to locate the keyboard for herself, unleashes a psychic attack on the pair, with Batman seemingly injured and Wade having to take him to a Lazarus pit. Bruce is saved, but instead of emerging from the water as the Dark Knight, he's instead transformed into Darklaw and begins to attack Deadpool. As they fight, Robin appears and tries to thwart Cassandra's plans, breaking the villain's mental grip and revealing that this fight and Bruce's injuries were all part of her hallucinations. While Damian disarms Nova, the heroes find the keyboard and its mysterious wielder, the Writer, who had tormented Animal Man's life several years earlier before being seemingly killed on a mission with the Suicide Squad. As Bruce and Wade stand before the Writer, Cassandra appears and tries to attack him. However, the Writer uses his keyboard for one final twist, merging Batman and Deadpool into one singular entity, and noting that this is what happens when you run out of ideas. With Cassandra defeated, Deadpool returns to his universe, and Batman alone confronts the Writer. We learn that the Dark Knight's mission was centered around a reformed former villain called Sportsmaster, whose wife had been killed during Cassandra Nova's universe-hopping antics. As a gesture of goodwill, the Writer pens one final tale, reviving Sportsmaster's wife and uniting the pair as Batman watches on. The events of this team-up are ultimately revealed to be the products of an interdimensional one-night stand between Kismet and Eternity, the living embodiments of the Marvel and DC universes, as the two cosmic beings ponder if they'll see each other in the future. In addition to being a fun one-shot story showcasing Batman and Deadpool's interactions, the comic also serves as something of an epilogue for many of Grant Morrison's other stories, revisiting concepts and characters from everything from Animal Man, New X-Men and their run on Batman, as well as serving as a pseudo-sequel to John Ostrander's Suicide Squad issue 58 from 1991. Regarding all of these influences and what Morrison sought to say in this issue, I asked Grant themselves why they chose to frame the crossover around the Writer, how it links back to all of these previous stories, and how it fits within their wider catalogue of work.
Well, the Writer was straight away, that I knew I wanted to do that once I thought about the fourth wall stuff, and I thought about, there's that interesting little thread that was left dangling back in the 90s, and I'd like to do something with that because it feels as if it pulls things tighter from my Animal Man stuff, and it kind of binds the beginning of my work at DC with this kind of work at the end. That approach definitely came first, and Damian came into it because I was given a brief which said, you've got Batman and Deadpool, you can have a guest star from DC and the villain from Marvel. So in the first book, you see that they've got the villain is the Joker because they had the villain from DC, so we'd have a villain from Marvel. And I obviously knew that the guest star would have to be Damian. It gave Batman someone to talk to for a start, and it allowed me to then set up the bit at the end where Damian appears, because it's set up early on and then he shows up. So that was a no-brainer. And as soon as I thought of that, I thought, who can the Marvel villain be? And I was running through a bunch of possibilities, and then it was obvious, it was Cassandra Nova because she'd been in the Deadpool Wolverine movie. So she was one of my characters that I think a wider mainstream audience can just understand. Damian's easy to get. He's the son of Batman and he dresses in a Robin costume. So he's Robin and he's the son of Batman. That's easy to understand. And Cassandra Nova was coming from a movie, so I didn't have to do too much explaining of who the villain was. Once you see her doing her thing, you kind of know she's the bad guy in the story. So again, it was an easy way to do, because the story was quite short and there wasn't a lot of space to really involve myself in the motivations of the villains or what the guest star had been up to. But if I could use them judiciously enough, then they would hit home, because, as I say, they were very recognisable to a more mainstream audience. So that was the idea there, and those characters were really obvious. But the thing that was great about that, obviously, is that I created both Cassandra Nova and Damian Wayne, so it allowed me to play even deeper into the fourth wall aspect of the story. And so obviously they were just the two perfect choices for those reasons.
Having been quite literally 2 decades in the making, I don't think it's a huge surprise for me to say that the Batman-Deadpool crossovers were a big success. And while I think each individual story has its own merits, for me personally, I much prefer Morrison and Mora's take, as I think it does a better job showcasing the similarities and differences between these two heroes, as well as building off and paying homage to a wide array of other stories from previous decades. And as a big Grant Morrison fan, seeing them return to the world of superheroes was one of my favourite things in all of comics in 2025. Morrison had mainly stepped away from superhero comics after the end of Superman and New Authority in 2022, and seemed content to leave their body of work in the genre alone. During my conversation with Grant, I asked how this issue may impact their future plans for further comic book projects, as well as their overall feelings about stepping back into the worlds of Marvel and DC.
Well, no, I'm really pleased with it. I'm glad that I did it, and it was, I enjoyed doing it. It was very specific. I had set myself a lot of very specific parameters to do it, and to do something, as I say, that was deliberately kind of crowd-pleasing and mainstream and designed to give readers what they wanted. I don't often do that. But this one, I just wanted to make it, like I say, a crowd-pleasing blockbuster thing. So I think it worked out. People got from it what I hoped they got from it, And the thing about these things is they come and they go, but ultimately it'll sell as a perennial over the time. And as long as people understand who Batman and Deadpool are, that story will still stand as a one-off. So no, I'm pretty pleased with it. And as I say, the main thing for me was that doing it kind of reinvigorated my interest in doing this stuff. So that was the big plus for me, that it kind of kick-started my enthusiasm again.
I should also mention that alongside the main Batman and Deadpool tales, both issues also feature a ton of backup stories with other characters. The Marvel-published issue included such crossovers as Wonder Woman and Captain America by Chip Zdarsky and Terry Dodson, Green Lantern and the Guardians of the Galaxy by Al Ewing and Dyke Kruan, and Daredevil and Green Arrow by Kevin Smith and Adam Kubert. Meanwhile, DC's featured Nightwing and Laura Kinney by Tom Taylor and Bruno Redondo, John Constantine and Doctor Strange by James Tynion, Joshua Williamson, Scott Snyder and Hayden Sherman, and Static and Miss Marvel by G. Willow Wilson and Dennis Cohen. Furthermore, the success of these two one-shots has seemingly convinced Marvel and DC to produce even more crossovers in the near future. In 2026, we will see the release of a new Spider-Man and Superman team-up, commemorating the original tale's 50th anniversary. Similar to Deadpool and Batman, this will see each company release their own one-shot title, with DC's coming first being brought to life by Mark Waid and Jorge Jimenez. As someone who's covered many of the DC and Marvel crossovers on this channel, I honestly wasn't sure whether these two publishers would ever work together again, at least not in the same scope and scale as previous decades. It seemed like for the last 20 plus years, both Marvel and DC were dead set against the idea, and it would take close to a miracle to see these respective worlds cross paths again. With all of that said though, I'm thrilled to be proven wrong, and the success of the two Batman Deadpool one-shots has seemingly inspired the two companies to keep this partnership going for years to come. So as we wait to see what the future holds for the next meeting between Marvel and DC, I think it's important to acknowledge the long history of crossovers and collaborations between these two universes, the often difficult behind the scenes process of bringing these once unimaginable stories to life, and how these two latest installments in this illustrious history are hopefully the start of an exciting new era. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to leave a like on this video and leave a comment down below as well. Let me know your thoughts on everything we talked about in today's video. I can't wait to hear what you have to say as always. If you're new to Owen Likes Comics, please make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notify bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. And if you enjoyed this and you want some more, there should be some other videos on screen right now that you might also enjoy. If you want to help the channel and help me make more videos, you can do so by going to patreon.com/OwenLikesComics. Or if you just want some more of me, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram and Blue Sky, just at Owen Likes Comics. But that's all for this video. Again, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully I will see you next time. But until then, take care and keep reading.